I mean, fine-tuning is basically an analogy argument. We compare our capability for fine-tuning design, what we see in the universe to make our existence possible. The other point we make is it looks like the fine-tuning evidence is much more persuasive if you want humans compared to if you want a bacterium. And particularly if you want a lot of humans on a planet with the technology where they can discover the great philosophical truths that lie behind the universe. That's where we see the greatest exponentiation of the fine-tuning evidence, and the fact that every month the fine-tuning evidence gets stronger than it was the month before.
I mean, one of the analogies I enjoyed...
Let's dissect that. I find it fascinating that Hugh Ross thinks the fine-tuning of the universe is actually such a strong argument for the existence of God and for a created universe. So he's talking about the odds of a universe coming to be in such a way that it makes the existence of life possible, whether you believe that it was spurred into existence and then it evolved, or if you're like me and believe that there was no macro evolution. But in any case, life does exist, and its existence and sustenance is hinged on the universe being so fine-tuned. And Hugh Ross then later in the debate goes on to throw in some numbers that express just how unlikely it is that such a universe can come into existence by chance.
Was that given one of these forces that require to be so very specific in order for life to be able to develop in the universe, to 1 part in 10 to the 37, and you compared it to covering the entire North American continent in dimes,
right,
all the way up to the moon, a height of about 239,000 miles. Next, pile dimes from here to the moon on 1 billion other continents the same size as North America. Paint 1 dime red and mix it into the billions of piles of dimes. Blindfold a friend and ask him to pick out the 1 dime, and those are the odds that they'll pick out the red dime at the odds of 10 to the 37.
And that's very conservative.
That's a very conservative.
Yeah, the odds are much more remote.
I think that...
What's been said, first of all, God seems to have favoured rock more than life. As there is more rock in the universe than there is life. Secondly, we're basing our views on the kind of chemistry that we're familiar with, and different fundamental constants also lead to different properties of the elements. So maybe a slightly different choice of fundamental constants would mean that, say, aluminium or silicon would play the role of carbon much more satisfactorily than carbon currently does. We've no idea. Okay, but these are sort of superficial arguments. Got 2 more arguments.
Okay.
One is the possible argument I know Hugh is expecting me to roll out. That is that there's trillions of universes. In fact, 10 to the 1,000 raised to the 40 trillion universes. Then it's not surprising that at least one of them has got this current complex.
We happen to have won the lottery of the multiverse in that sense.
We couldn't avoid winning it, as it were, because we're in it. So that's the
there's the
possibility. And whether one could ever get experimental evidence for the existence of the multiverse.
And are you in a sense more... Do you find that even as hypothetical as that theory is, it's more satisfactory than God as a possible explanation?
Because it involves no causality, and therefore no causa.
Right.
But the fourth, or whatever it is, argument is, I think you have to think about the foundations of what we're talking about. What's so special about life?
Okay.
Why are we making life such a marvelous property?
Okay, from what I gathered, Atkins' arguments are along the lines of God favors rocks, hypothetical fundamental constants he couldn't even explain well, multiverse, and what's so special about life anyway. Okay, I'm not an expert, and when I think about rocks, I see things like shelter, terrain, resource. But what the actual expert, Hugh Ross, adds is that actually the universe needs to be of certain mass in order for life to be possible.
If you don't have a lot of rocks, you're not going to get humans. I mean, the total size of the universe must be extraordinarily fine-tuned to get life anywhere in the universe. So it must have a lot of rocks in order for life to be possible, given the laws of physics.
So let's move to the next argument, hypothetical fundamental constants. With that argument, Atkins says that the basic chemical elements, or whatever fundamental constant is, I admit this goes a little bit over my head. So if they were different, that would cause different properties of the universe. But I don't really see how that proves or disproves the created universe. It's just some hypothetical that he entertains. Even he calls it a superficial argument, so I won't dive too deep into that. The multiverse, on the other hand, just poses even more questions. He says that the universe, the multiverse, doesn't presuppose, it doesn't need causality, which I don't really know how that can be possibly true, because you are faced with the question, how did the universe start? And you can't even answer that, but you say, oh, you know what, there might be billions of universes. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but Hugh Ross says that actually the multiverse requires causality.
And you mentioned the multiverse. All multiverse models are subject to the space-time theorem, so you don't avoid the causality issue. And I notice you quote Leonard Susskind. I mean, he's an atheist like yourself, but he wrote a paper basically saying we have to avoid, as atheists, the multiverse hypothesis. The reason why, it explains everything. And a model that explains everything explains nothing.
Like God.
Well, let me continue, because you'll see an analogy in the Crater and the Cosmos. Is if you're going to hypothesize a multiverse, you're going to have an infinite number of planets like Earth. You're going to have an infinite number of trees. You're going to have birch trees. Birch trees peel white sheets of bark. You're going to have an infinite variety of universes. They're going to have birch trees that peel pieces of bark that are the size of A4 paper. They're going to fall on soil that's got random chemicals in it that make markings on it, which means that all the papers published by all the scientists in the world didn't come from their minds, they came from the multiverse. The multiverse did it.
And finally, what is so special about life? How about that? We still cannot create life. Yes, artificial procreation, altering life, altering genes, is within the wheelhouse of today's science. And here's why Atkins actually proposes this as an argument, because later when asked where did our mind come from, he answers that it came from evolution, which the expert Hugh Ross says again violates the principle of cause and effect, because we know that the lesser always comes from the greater.
Everything we see in the universe testifies that there's a mind behind it. I mean, where did our mind come from?
It came from evolution.
Well, there again, you're violating the principle of cause and effect in the sense you're
No, I'm
trying.
not.
Yeah, well, you are in this sense. Everything we measure in science tells us that you get the lesser from the greater,
No,
not
that's
the other way
nonsense.
around.
That is nonsense, absolute nonsense.
So when asked where did our mind come from, David Atkins says evolution. Did you use your mind in determining that? I mean, what kind of statement is that? How can you be sure? Couple his statement that our mind came from evolution with the statement that there's nothing special about life. And what kind of person do you get? An anarchist. Really do whatever you want. There's no ultimate meaning. Exactly the same was preached by the Satanist Aleister Crowley. Do what thou wilt. He doesn't even have good evidence for what he's saying, but he prefers to think that way instead of admitting that it's highly likely, even from a scientific standpoint that God created the universe. Because, after all, what is the basis of science? It is what we can observe. And in that sense, personal experience can also be scientific. So he can simply discard all personal human experience, the fact that we have feelings, we know that it matters when somebody is hurt. Go ahead and tell you, oh no, it doesn't matter, that's just evolution telling you so. Then what is the basis of punishment of our judicial system anyway? If we don't really have a free choice, but it was all pre-programmed by evolution. To illustrate my point, I would like to show you that it's perfectly okay for these scientists to lie when it's about spreading their agenda.
But you know, that disturbs me for the following reason. Reading your book, The God Delusion, you say that it's under scholarly dispute among historians that Jesus actually existed. Now, I checked with the ancient historians. That is not so. And it disturbed me. History is not natural science. But what I don't understand is this, why you would write something like that.
I don't think it's a very important question whether Jesus existed. There are some historians, most historians think he did, some
They
historians
certainly
don't.
do. I couldn't find an ancient historian that didn't.
Well, there are one or two, but I don't really care, actually, because precisely because it's petty.
I get the impression that you're not taking history really seriously. Otherwise, you'd interact with it. And I'm trying to get to the basis of why that is so, because you regard what Jesus has done and who he is as petty. And
when you look at history, and let's leave aside, maybe I alluded to the possibility that some historians think Jesus never existed. I take that back. Jesus existed. We throw away childhood obsessions, we throw away the sort of imaginary friend that comforts us when we're children, and we feel the need for some kind of parent figure to turn to. I think when we grow up, we need to cast that aside and stand up tall in the universe. And it's cold, and we're not going to last for it. We're going to die, and we face up to that. And I think that's a nobler way of getting through life than to pin your hopes on childhood illusions.